Hello and welcome back. Today I am joined by Dr. Zhao Zhang, who is going to discuss the big challenges that China faces in dealing with growing urban populations and the demand for housing. Zhao, you're very welcome. You're an expert on the development of the city of Nanjing, so maybe we can begin by you telling us a little bit about the history of the city.
Thanks very much, Neve, for inviting me. Nanjing is one of the most important historical cities in China. Historically, in the early Ming Dynasty, in the 14th century, Nanjing was the capital city of China, and its 35 kilometers long inner city wall was built during that time. More recently, Nanjing was also the capital city of the Republic of China for several years in the first half of the 20th century.
So, can you tell us whereabouts in China is Nanjing located?
Yes, Nanjing is located in eastern China. It's in Yangtze River Delta region, and it's about 300 kilometers away from Shanghai. And the Greater Nanjing areas has over 8 million long-term residents, and it's economic, political, and educational center of East China.
So Nanjing is obviously a very important historic urban settlement, Zhao, but it's undergone a lot of changes recently. So how would you describe the changes in the city over the last 10 years?
Yes, actually, the size of the urbanized area has dramatically expanded. In the last 10 years, the population has grown around 20%, primarily because of the movement of the large numbers of migrants from rural areas to Nanjing. Mm-hmm. And the city is economically prosperous, and employment opportunities in a number of the different type of industries, from construction sectors to catering services, continue to attract migrants. Mm-hmm. In Nanjing, the local government has been looking at rundown inner city areas and seeing the potential for working with the real estate developers to generate them.
So, Zhao, has this approach had any problems?
Yes, this approach has not been without problems. These areas were the traditional residential neighborhood of the city, the historical core, and they had a high density of population before they were targeted for the development. Despite the historical significance of the buildings in the area, which are mainly in the low-rise bungalows, many of them having been abandoned or demolished as part of the redevelopment programs since the early 2000s.
So what is there now in their place?
In their place, a lot of high-end residential and commercial high-rise buildings have been built with the aim of maximizing the economic benefits to the city. Things like restaurants, shopping malls, high-quality apartments, etc. had all been constructed, and the built environment is very difficult to what was there before.
These seem like positive kind of economic benefits, but in a context where the population is growing and it's generating this demand for housing, it seems unusual that the government would make the demand for housing even worse by displacing people. So do they have a plan for responding and providing new housing, and what happens to the people who are made to leave?
Yes, and most of those people evicted are relatively poor residents who are financially unable to buy housing on the commercial market before the displacement. And so they depend on the resettlement plans made by the local government. So since 2011, the Chinese central government has encouraged the building of the so-called indemnificatory housing.
So Zhao, what is indemnificatory housing?
This is the state-led urban low-income housing scheme made up of the owner-occupied affordable housing, public rental housing, and the low-rent housing. In the case of Nanjing, the local authority planned to provide 270,000 units of this type of housing from 2011-2015.
So can you describe what this type of housing is like, Zhao, and has it been positively welcomed?
Actually, most of this type of housing projects, including a considerable number of the resettlement housing units, are located on the city outskirts, alongside the outer ring road in the relatively remote locations. The public facilities are usually poor. This can make it difficult for residents to find a job near their resettlement sites. There are not enough high-quality medical and educational resources, such as hospitals and schools.
So, do people see these indemnificatory housing locations as an improvement?
Not necessarily. As a result, most people generally do not see the so-called indemnificatory housing as an improvement. And the policy, although ambitious, is not really welcomed. Despite the substandard housing conditions in some inner city neighborhoods, many people are resisting being evicted. They use staying put as a strategy even when the living conditions are extremely poor. Other people are resisting this displacement as they consider it's unfair to upgrade central city areas in Nanjing and then market them purely just as the rich consumers. Long-term residents often feel they are being told to make way and sacrifice their homes for speculative urban regeneration.
We will come back to this issue in a later learning step this week when we explore gentrification as an important urban issue. But now coming back to our conversation about China, Zhao, has indemnificatory housing addressed the housing crisis?
Not necessarily. As I mentioned earlier, about 60% of this type of housing has gone to displacees. And about 2/3 of the public rental housing has been allocated to the high-skilled worker who has potential to contribute more to the tax and also who are more affordable to pay for the market rent. Ironically, only 4% of this type of housing belongs to low-rent housing, which is targeted for the poorer and the low-income people. So this is actually against the will of the building this type of housing for improve the general affordability of the overall population. So for the people such as the universities graduate and migrant worker, they were priced out of the inner city because they have the very limited affordability for the gentrified and high price housing in the inner city. At the same time, they are not included into this type of housing, which is located as urban fringe.
So I think this is an issue that isn't just an issue for China, but it's an issue for places generally around the world as we try to deal with the housing crisis. So Zhao, I just want to say thank you very much for sharing your insights and your knowledge on housing in China and in Nanjing in particular. It's been really nice to have this talk. So the experience of Nanjing shows us that sometimes government policies have unintended consequences. And we encourage you to explore this in relation to other cities around the world, to look at how local and central government policies are having an impact on the housing challenges that are facing your city.